Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. Normally, I have an idea or a topic that I want to discuss, but today I really don't have one to introduce. I just have a guy on. He's an actor who's been in numerous movies and television shows, including playing Jacob on the TV show Lost and Lucifer on Supernatural. He's also a regular guest on the Ayn Rand Centre UK. Mark Pellegrino, welcome to the show.
What's up, man? It's good to see you on your show.
Yes, not on the. How do you say it? Arc 2K or Arc UK? Arc UK. The little, I don't know I forget even what they're called, but when you have a slew of letters that mean something, I forgot what. It's not anagram. I don't know. Acronyms. Acronyms.
Oh, there you go. I guess that's it.
Acronyms.
I'm the wrong person to ask. I've been flying for 20 hours and I'm still on Paris time, so I have travel brain.
Well, that's all right. You with travel brain is vastly superior to most people on regular brain. So I actually want to talk to you a little bit about your experiences in Hollywood. But before that, I want to know, what were your political leanings when you first became an actor? And I don't mean when you became an actor doing the school play. I mean, when it was, it was a legitimate career for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was a Democrat from the time I first registered at 18, and that only solidified in my early 20s. I was an environmentalist from the time I was about 12. I wrote letters to the President of the United States when I was young, for the fur seals, the poor fur seals in the Aleutian Islands, and got back massive economic impact reports that I didn't understand at 12. But I still persisted in my environmentalism and my left-leaning political thinking until my mid-20s.
So when you first entered Hollywood, you were on the left.
So yeah, pretty much typical of what you see in Hollywood.
So what changed? I know that you at some point came in contact with the writings of Ayn Rand. Was she the first sort of non-democrat thinker that influenced you, or were there others that came before
her? Well, it just so happened that my acting teacher was an anti-establishment weirdo, and he seemed to lean to the right, and he exposed me to alternative perspectives. Most of the class didn't appreciate this, but I actually did appreciate it. And it started out with talk radio, and it started out with conservative commentators who didn't have as dumb things to say about stuff as I thought, and I found myself in agreement with quite a bit of what they had to say, not the social stuff, but quite a bit of other things, and that started me exploring pundits on the right, Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams, Cal Thomas, various guys who wrote editorials, commentary on the Times, and I found myself agreeing with them quite a bit. And then a friend of mine introduced me to Ayn Rand, and it happened after an all-night debate that took place at Gorky's Cafe, which was a Russian cafe that used to be in Hollywood. And it was sort of a hangout for actors, right? I'd go rehearse at my buddy's house in Hollywood. We'd go read plays at Gorky's Cafe and talk about the plays, and sometimes even work on them in this crazy cafe that was open 24 hours a day. And we'd have coffee and we'd eat, and we'd stay up all night working on stuff, and often arguing and debating. And of course, I was an environmentalist, and I would debate with him about stuff, and he would constantly leave me speechless. I didn't quite know how to respond to some of the stuff that he said. Not because it was particularly brilliant, but it was unusual, and I hadn't heard his argument or take on things before. And so I was convinced that I just didn't have the right words, to convince him. So I said, let's do a book exchange, man. Let's give each other 5 of the most important books in our lives at the moment. He gave me 2, Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. And they absolutely threw me into a tailspin, for sure. A good one. It got me thinking quite a bit. But I found myself, if I compared myself as a man to the characters in the novels, I was somewhere in between the bad guys and the good guys, and I couldn't quite find a home. That was a little distressing to me. But it led me to read her nonfiction, which I liked even better. It was so clear and clean, crisp, and made absolute sense to me. I felt like I got smarter reading it. I know Rand said that about certain writers, that she felt herself get smarter reading them, and I felt myself feeling that same sentiment. And of course, that pushed me even further to the right for a while. And of course, then that changed over time to what I am today, which is a liberal, a classical liberal, who finds almost no affinity with the right anymore, and almost no affinity with the left. So was that a
It is.
coherent enough
I'm
history?
interested. What books did you give the guy?
Yeah, so I remember only a couple. One of them was Illusions by Richard Bach. I don't know if you've ever read that.
I have not.
He wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Oh, okay.
So the
That I've
premise
heard of.
so the premise of Illusions is basically that, you make reality. Literally, you make reality. And what distinguishes us normies from, say, the enlightened guy like a Jesus or a Buddha is that they know it and they believe it. And that's why they can walk on water and we can't, because they understand that what they believe manufactures the material world around them. For example, I remember the main character who's sort of struggling with issues, listening to somebody play the guitar, and somebody, or maybe that was in Dan Millman's book. Anyway, there is a scene in one of these books, either Way of the Peaceful Warrior or Illusions. Oh no, it's Illusions, where the Messiah guy's playing the guitar, and his premise, he'd never picked up a guitar before, but he could play it perfectly, and his premise was, well, just all practices is just giving yourself permission to do what you already know. So there's tons of Platonic concepts in there, and things that I didn't understand at the time, but wow, they made me feel fantastic. And I thought that would be an enlightening book for him. Dan Millman's Way of the Peaceful Warrior, also in that Buddhistic strain. The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, which is, I don't know if do you know that book? You're smiling like
The reason I'm laughing, so when I was in prison, I was 21 and I decided to change my life, for 22. One of the first books I ever read was Further Along the Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck.
Okay.
I also read his book, A World Waiting to Be Born, right?
Okay.
I also got into Buddhism. Not to where I was going to be a Buddhist, but I read the stuff. I read also Norman Vincent Peale's Power of Positive Thinking. And I actually, for a little while, held the belief that you're just talking about, that if we could actually believe something, regardless of what it was, we could make it happen. To show you further similarities, I started off in my early political studies as I called myself a conservative, a right-wing conservative. I wanted to listen to Rush Limbaugh every day to educate myself about conservatism. What ended up happening was, through reading, it just became the social stuff just became inconsistent with the freedom stuff. And then, of course, Ayn Rand just blew it all out of the water. But I've done a similar thing that you've done more than once, where I tell someone, look, I'll give you a few books, you give me a few books, and we'll see. So as I'm listening to you talk, it just resonates because it's so similar to what I went through. And I'm just sitting here thinking, I wonder how many people have had this experience, because it's not something you don't go around talking to people about it. So, if I didn't have you on right now, I wouldn't have known that about you. It's interesting to me.
I bet it's a fairly common experience for people who are into ideas and are actually aspirational. For others, not so much, but you're aspirational, I'm aspirational. I wanted to learn, I wanted to be right.
Yes.
And I discovered that I wasn't. But that's still aspirational. So yeah, M. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. Maybe Happiness is a Serious Problem by Dennis Prager, things like that. Uh, all of which resonated with me in my 20s as a dour, sort of depressed, melancholic character that I was back then, attempting as best I could to deal with childhood trauma and being told that that's what was probably the cause of all my melancholy. Those were the books that I focused on at first, but it was actually the Fountainhead, even more so than Atlas Shrugged, that really got to me. I remember reading it on a bus, finishing it. I just got on a bus and I just took it to the end of the valley, to the end of its line, and I was just determined to finish the book. I finished it and I was devastated. Not in a good way. Like I walked out to the island in the middle of two streaming highways and I collapsed on the grass and I just started bawling.
Wow.
Now, I was bawling because I felt lots of elements of Rourke in me, for sure, but I also felt lots of elements of Peter Keating in me. And I think, I don't know that that's unfamiliar to a lot of people out there, but certainly to an actor, or there's reasons there's a lot of reasons you go into the acting business, and not a small part of it is like a bit of your soul is starved for something, and there's a second-handedness, sort of a promiscuity to that desire to get attention from other people, that I recognized in Keating and in me. And Rand didn't give me any bridge between the two. So it was as if these characters were baked whole it was almost, there was as if I was reading a form of determinism. These guys were what they were. There was no way out of it. Keating was going to be Keating until he died. Rourke was going to be Rourke, and there was no way for a Keating to become a Rourke, or even to approach it. And so that really disturbed me for a very long time. And of course, I was going to therapy at the time too. So, real self-help in the sense of changing your orientation to the world and attempting to change your sense of life, that takes a lot of focus and a lot of work. And over time I was able to bridge the gap on my own. She didn't have to give me the answers to that. I just had to have the ideal and to understand the ideal better. And as time went on, as I studied more, I began to integrate more information and experience more. I began to see how I could achieve that ideal in my own way. I wouldn't be exactly like him, or maybe even anywhere near him, but I could be my own version of that guy.
Wow. You reminded me of so many things. So if I'm jumping over all over the place, forgive me. But when you just said that about you couldn't be that guy, I remember one time I was talking to a friend of mine in prison and talking about something. And I told him, well, remember, Howard Rourke did that. And he said, yeah, but I'm not Howard Rourke. I'm Brent McCall. And that to me is like, that's the real message. But it is so easy to get caught up in, why am I not more like this guy? Well, he's him, I'm me, and that's why I have to be. And as you said that just now about them being, sort of baked in the characters, I remember when Rourke actually tells Keating it's too late, when Keating, wants to become an artist. And it often reminds me of, in Christianity, they teach, for instance, that angels have free will, and they teach that Satan is an angel. So I've often asked them, so then can Satan change? Can he repent and become a different person? I mean, a different type of being. And I think that might actually be a weakness in Rand. Maybe, I don't know if weakness is the right word, but she never covered that, right? How to go from one to the other. Now, I figured it out. You figured it out. So maybe it's just something people have to figure out for themselves. But I wish there would have been, and maybe there is that I'm not remembering, but I wish there would be a character that goes from one to the other, that starts off a Keating and ends up a Rourke.
I would like to see that. I think one of the main criticisms of her work is the simplicity of the characters. They have arcs, but they're certainly not like the arcs we're used to seeing in very complex television and novels today, which I happen to really like. Um, yeah, God, I wanted to say something and now I just forgot what I was going to say about that eating stuff. I'll try to remember it later. It's a travel brand, but it was very. Oh, wait. You go back to what you said earlier. You said we weren't supplied that stuff. We had to figure it
We
out.
had to work it out for ourselves. Like now, in fairness, I read The Psychology of Self-Esteem by the often hated Nathaniel Branden. I happen to think that that book is a work of genius. It's phenomenal, and it helped me tremendously, as did other books that he's written. This is to say nothing about his character. I didn't know him, and to be honest, I really don't care. Like,
I did.
you did know him.
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
Okay.
But I mean, I agree with you. I'm like one of those outliers, I think, in the objectivist world that as much as I understand why people in the objectivist movement don't like him, pretty much everything I ever read of his, which was pretty much everything he ever wrote, actually really did help me quite a
Yeah,
bit.
me too. A lot. Like to grow the sentence stems, his focus on authenticity. There was just something about the way that he put things that allowed me to grow. And I talked to you before about Stanton Salmon. Him too. Of course, you is not a criminal. That probably wouldn't have the same effect. But the two of them combined with the philosophy of Ayn Rand made me who I am. And I think that objectivists do themselves a disservice by not reading what he's written. And it doesn't mean you have to like him. He could be a complete scumbag. That doesn't matter to me. If a complete scumbag tells me don't do crack cocaine, I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen. I'm not going to do crack cocaine anyway, but I think you get my point.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But Rand didn't even get his writings out of the virtuous selfishness or capitalism, the unknown ideal. She kept them in because she saw value in them. So I don't know why I can't get value out of them, or you or any other objective.
And frankly, I don't know that we would see objectivism growing the way it is as a formal philosophy without Nathaniel Branden. So despite his flaws, in some respects, and his flaws were pretty intense, especially if you read James Valiant's take on what happened between them.
And he did a great job of exposing Branden's character. I'll give Valiant that in that book.
He very much did, but he also shows a very complex character who has these terrible flaws that whether or not he worked through them later in life, I don't know. There's a lot of complexity in having a public image, a very public life, where you invest in a certain perspective and profit from a certain perspective. It takes a great deal of integrity and courage to break away from it, where you're trying to create a legacy for yourself. It's a very complicated, often, and dishonest, since he did so many dishonest things, world. But within that, there's a great deal of genius and authenticity and originality that makes that's more like the characters that I understand in life and more like the people that I see in life. We're all of us a mixed bag of people, because a great deal of our sensibility about things came to us at a pre-verbal, pre-conceptual stage. So that stuff is hard to get out of your bones without a lot of work, and it's important.
A lot of work.
A lot of work, like a lot of work, a lot of thought changing, a lot of perspective changing, a lot of allowing ideas to integrate into your gut and to become values. That's no small shit. Like that's tough. That's tough stuff, and for me, it could also be a combination of getting older and having experienced so much that I understand more where people come from and how little I actually have to worry about what I thought was important as a young man. So it's difficult to say, how much of my growth and my experience from going from a half Keating, half Rourke to a closer version of more consistent work is a part of just experience and age and not giving a crap after a while, and or the philosophy. I don't know where the one begins and the other ends. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's one of the biggest things that I've had to overcome is the concern with what other people are thinking of me. And Nathaniel Branden helped me immensely with that. Because it ultimately doesn't make a difference. If you're over there thinking right now, boy, look at this asshole at the other end of the screen, it has no effect on me. You know what I mean? As my thinking has no effect on you. Now, I care about what my boss, if I'm at a job, thinks to the extent that he can fire me, for poor performance. But what he thinks of me or what people think of me means nothing. But I want to go back to this the internal struggle of change for a second. Have you read Les Miserables?
Yeah.
Do you remember the part in the book? It's called "Tempest in a Skull." Is the sort of the headline or the transition, whatever. But it's when Jean Valjean finds out that there's this other guy that is being charged as him, and he has to decide if he's going to throw away this great new life that he's put together to go and turn himself in to get that guy to go free, who's probably just going to go back to committing crimes anyway, because the guy's a crook. And what he goes through, the anxiety and the stress, reminds me so much of the entire change process. Because it's not like you just, oh, wow, I want to be better. So now I'm better. It takes facing things that you don't want to face, in admitting things to yourself that nobody wants to admit, and then actually putting in the effort. And I think that is something that I would like to see in objectivist circles to be more, what's the word, appreciated or more praised. Because oftentimes I'll run into this thing, I've run into it recently, where I'll expect people to be, after 5 years, what took me 15 to get to. And I have to remind myself that, listen, I wasn't always where I am today. 10 years from now, I'll be better off. If somebody's putting forth the effort to be a better person and being honest about it, then I'm going to respect that person and like that person, regardless of where they are. But, in like the essay, and I agree with it, How to Live a Rational Life in an Irrational Society, never fail to pronounce a moral judgment. I think that's vital, but I also think it's vital to always keep context front and center when we're doing that. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And because that idea, that objectivists do have, judge and be prepared to be judged, makes us as a group, as a whole, seem like we have no empathy for people who are suffering, and particularly people who are suffering aspirationally while aspiring to be better, but confronting aspects of their character that are despicable and having to change those. And even more interesting, I think, you identify with aspects of yourself as malevolent as some of those aspects may be, they're familiar to you. And when they start dying, when you start seeing that you need to kill them, it's like you're going through an internal death yourself. It's that scary. And for us to contextualize that as objectivists, understand what it's like to make those gargantuan changes, and that most of us probably lie in that spectrum between Rourke and Keating. As much as we'd like to see ourselves as the heroes, it takes quite a bit. Some moral giants are there already, but most of us have to really work our way up through it and suffer quite a bit to get there. One of the reasons I think Jordan Peterson is so popular and why he's beating objectivists in like the argument is not just because he's allied himself with the right wing and they're sort of the dominant cultural movement right now, but because he acknowledges the problem of pain and the problem of suffering in a person's life. And objectivists sort of gloss over it because it's not important. And I get Rand's perspective that pain isn't what's metaphysically important, living is, and all that. But it's an aspect of life that that I think needs to be dealt with. And objectivists can deal with it in a uniquely wonderful way if we engage our context, that context that would make us more empathetic.
Now, I don't know, but I'm going to speculate that being an actor, you have to be able to feel emotions deeply and to play a given role and to really delve deep inside and assume a different character. Is that a helpful skill when trying to incorporate and understand the objectivist philosophy and the ideas of self-esteem and change? Because like you're already superficially changing to play a role. So I'm just wondering how that interacts with when you actually are doing it.
Yeah, I think eventually they are quite complementary, but most acting schools make actors an enemy of their minds. Now, there's a reason for that, if you can imagine. There's a reason. The reason is that we're performance art, and when you're performing something, you can't be thinking about it per se. You have to have automatized stuff within you and do it, right? Like, so a boxer is a performance artist, right? He can't be he can be strategizing and intuiting what the other person's going to do, but what he does has to be automatic behaviors in a moment, right? And so he can't be in his head. If he's in his head about the punches that are coming at him and how to get away from how to pursue his offense, he's dead. And the same thing goes with acting. It's a very present art form that requires you to perform and be spontaneous. And unfortunately, the language it's used is often anti-mind. You're in your head, you're thinking too much, and actors take that particular and they generalize it into a principle that it's bad to think. It's actually better for me to feel, and feeling is truth. And they honestly do equate that with truth. So it's the opposite. They wind up learning the opposite of what Rand said, which was emotions aren't tools of cognitions, but for actors, they are. And a great deal of your work is in the emotional realm. Even if you're logically following a plot and the arc of a character, the spine of a character, you're doing it emotionally too. You're finding your emotional identification with values all through the part so that it comes out of you organically. And it's only over time that you're able to understand how important the mind is in that creative process. If you have been told from your very early stages of your artistic development that it's bad to think. That's why I never use those terms when I'm talking to actors. I never put down logic. I never put down the mind. I use other expressions to let the actor know that they're not in the moment. They're not present, which is where they need to be. Because when they're present, their subconscious is free. And all of that information that we have in our subconscious becomes accessible to them, and including an emotional life, an unpredictable emotional life. So they are very compatible if taught properly, but most artists think the mind is a terrible, terrible thing and don't respect it. And I think that's why you see so many actors and artists on the wrong side of history now.
This isn't really objectivism related, but it's something I want to know. I remember when Heath Ledger died. And on the news, I saw that he had been playing, he was filming for Batman. He was playing the Joker. I've never seen the movie, but they were talking about how it's a very dark character, in that by enmeshing himself in that, it perhaps caused him to go into a spiral of depression. Is there any truth to that kind of thing? I mean, like you played Lucifer, you know what I mean? So like, do you actually, does it actually affect you emotionally when you're doing that?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple ways to work on a part, and all of those ways sort of come under the umbrella of a thing we call the method. And the more method you use, the more immersive you are with respect to your work, right? You're not indicating a part, you're not acting an idea, you're attempting to emotionally identify with the character and then live the moments, not act them, not pretend them, but live them, which can be extraordinarily arduous depending on the part. And a nihilistic creep like the Joker can be a very psychologically dangerous territory to tread if you're really trying to go there, and you haven't learned to separate out your work from your personal life. And in acting, that can be very, very gray territory. It's tough to do. When I look at Heath Ledger's performance, which at first struck me as a work of genius because I'd never seen that type of characterization before. You should watch it, because what you should do is watch Cesar Romero's version of the Joker in the 60s Batman.
I've seen that. I've seen that.
Okay, so now you got that in your mind, and now watch Heath Ledger, and you'll see an extraordinary characterization. But when I look at it over and over and over again, it seems just that, a characterization. And when I hear about the journals that he wrote, they're not a man unraveling to me. To me, if he had really unraveled, I mean, you would have seen, like, I don't know if did you ever see the documentary Crumb, based on the artist Crumb? He had a brother who had a schizophrenic break, who was an artist as well. And as he began to disappear psychologically, his art changed completely. Like the work, his figures became teeny. The words became big, and then he eventually became sort of autistic and incapable of communicating with anybody. I think he eventually committed suicide. But I didn't see that insanity in any of the journal. I just saw a guy working through, the arcs and aspects of a character, and digging up pictures and stuff that would give him impressions. And yes, that does have an intense psychological effect on you. And it can, I know my friend John Bernthal, when he did The Punisher, he exposed himself to all kinds of horrible stuff just to have that in his gut, all the time, to fuel him. I don't know if you saw that show, or if that the character's an ex-military guy, and he's a vigilante, and he's filled with a lot of rage and PTSD, and so he exposed himself to a lot of stuff to feel that can be damaging. But this is where I think that having a philosophy to counter that kind of stuff helps you, and where I think I had a massive perspective shift because of philosophy with respect to acting. And I'll give you an example. I did a movie called A Murder of Crows, where I play a guy who tries to get revenge, who's basically a serial killer, but a drama teacher at Tulane University, and he uses his characters to stalk this one particular bad lawyer, whom I attempt to kill at the end, because I experienced this grave injustice that I was trying to correct. And I remember we were in New Orleans filming for about a month. And I remember walking around the streets of New Orleans, imagining all the things I did with my family, who are now gone, in various parts of New Orleans. So I could walk to these places, and I would break down in tears, in certain places, remembering this great moment with my daughter here, my wife here, this thing that we did over there. And I began to see that that was having a terrible effect on me. So I tried to counter it with comedy. When I would get home, I'd turn on, Laurel and Hardy or something to make me laugh, to try to counter it. But as I began to develop later on in life, I remembered that all the things we act are called plays, Plays, plays. That means you're playing, like as in a child, like fun. And I began to see that, well, with that perspective, no matter how intensely I'm feeling something, or no matter how negativist or anarchistic my character may be, if I understand it as a creative process, that I'm a performance artist creating something new, then there's always the element within me that takes it as playful, it takes it as creative, and removes the self-destructive element of the negative feelings that I have, because I'm just doing something creative, right? I'm not trying to be the guy, but I am trying to relate to the experiences, and that is my form of work. And the more suggestible and playful I am with it, the more free and flexible and plastic and unpredictable my performance can be, and the happier I'm going to be when I get home. And that's philosophy talking to me. That's this philosophy telling me that I don't have to destroy my psyche to be an actor. And I don't have to destroy my brain to be intuitive and unpredictable and emotional. And I'm emotional. And I have big feelings, man.
You know, I found objectivism in prison, and this might shock you, but prison is not exactly filled with rational people. You know, and you don't actually have a bunch of advocates of free market capitalism either. So it was difficult at times. I mean, I would get you're being brainwashed, and then people would accuse new friends of mine that I was brainwashing them, and I was, I think I'm better than people. You think you're smarter than people. I went through, a whole host of things, to the point. I mean, one day, I love the story. I was walking around my block, and I was by myself, and just walking around thinking. And I heard a guy say, "Look at him walking around like he's better than everybody." And I thought, wow, I just thought I was walking around. like what the hell are you talking? It wasn't like, it's not in my head. Look, I'm better than everybody. It was the furthest thing from my mind. But my point is, it was a hostile environment, hostile to the philosophy that I was incorporating into my life. In Hollywood, being so left, I wonder, were other actors, producers, directors, the environment as a whole, hostile to you when you strayed from the sort of Hollywood orthodoxy, for lack of a better phrase?
No.
Really?
No.
See, that surprises me. I would
Okay,
expect they
so,
would be.
but there's a caveat to all this, but
Okay.
no. And I was always very open about my perspective on the set. And that perspective usually led to some vigorous, not negative, but vigorous and interesting conversations with people. And dare I say, conversions from some folks. Then social media happened, and the CW, in its infinite wisdom, put me on Twitter, and I saw a forum for philosophical exchange that could be earth-shattering, and so I started to use it as a forum for philosophical exchange, as opposed to just a place to sell my wares and to build up followers and make myself more popular, which sells. It sells you. And after 2000, I got put on in 2012, but after 2014, I began to notice the shift in the tone of conversation that was decidedly toxic. Yet I persisted because of the toxicity, to become a little bit more strident and vocal with my sensibility of the world and my philosophy. Now, it didn't stop anyone from hiring me, because I was a creature that nobody in the business could quite figure out, right? I clearly had liberal premises. I agreed with a lot of the things that they would probably consider sacred ground. And I clearly wasn't a conservative, so they couldn't hate me because they couldn't quite place me. But I did notice that one executive I had an argument with one executive producer, but one executive producer who hired me twice. I did notice that he stopped following me on Twitter, and then I did a special show where they honored the composer of this big show. I don't want to say anybody's name, because I'm going to save that, but they honored the composer of this big show at the Ford Amphitheater in Hollywood, and they wanted me to read this scene. And backstage, I saw this executive producer who had normally been the sweetest guy to me. And sometimes he would look at me like he was in love with me. Like he loved all the things I said. He loved the way I worked. He was very enthusiastic about me as a person, me as an artist, aspiring artist. But suddenly he just seemed so cold, like really cold. And a part of me went, what did he read? What did he see? What happened between the two of us? And it wasn't the place to ask him because there was too much stuff going on. But I really hope to get an opportunity to ask him if something happened to him, and if he hasn't hired me since that last show we did, because of his feeling about what I am. And I say that because they almost never reflect what I am. They reflect an idea of what I am, which isn't what I am. So it's very possible that now that I've had such explosive encounters on social media, some of them not so nice because I tend to fight back. I've learned to tone it down a bit, but there's people that archive that shit and send them to producers and try to get you to lose your job, and it does have an effect because, let's face it, it's not like Hollywood's brave. They're not brave. They think they are. They like to pretend they're, the cutting edge of courage, but and in some respects, with respect to some of the performances, they are. But when it comes to society, social movements, politics, they're almost complete and total cliches, and lack wisdom and courage almost
Yeah, the
universally.
idea of courage, because if you're an actor or an actress and you're giving a speech at the Oscars or wherever, and you give a speech that might be controversial to middle America, you're still surrounded by people that agree with you, that are going to embrace you for what you're saying. And then they say, oh, you're so courageous. Well, how? You're not bucking the tide. Not that you should, just to buck the tide. If you think something, think it and say it. But that's not courage. It reminds me, I read somewhere Tucker Carlson has so much courage. Why? He's catering to an audience and getting filthy rich for doing so. Like, where's the courage?
And that's at least he's catering to an audience. These people that make these kinds of speeches at these award ceremonies aren't even catering to the audience that essentially pays their bills. They're catering to the people who hire them. So it's even worse in the sense that at least Tucker Carlson, as gross as he is, he's building up a horde of human beings that like the things that he says. When some jackoff, spouts off politically at the Academy Awards or the SAG Awards, they're talking to the people who are hiring them for the next job and saying, I'm in the in group, hire me. God forbid they should say something that bucks the system. They wouldn't. And that's where they demonstrate how uncourageous they are.
Now, you said that you've had some discussions, maybe, I don't think you used the word debate, but that's the impression that I got. Were people that disagreed with you at least courageous face to face? You know what I mean? And say what they think and expressing their disagreements with you and actually giving you a hearing and engaging?
Yeah, I mean, I always had pretty civil discussions with pretty much everybody. And this goes to even, producers and directors on shows. But I can straddle both sides of the line. I know the conservatives in Hollywood, and I know the ones who are hidden and because they've shown themselves to me because they know I'm not going to judge them harshly or hate them for the way they think. And the conservatives actually have to hide their perspective. And it might have been, so we talk about this, objectivists talk about it all the time with respect to when is it appropriate to speak out, and what exactly is the cost to you to speaking out. And one could make the case that I shouldn't be speaking out. I'm certainly not in the position where I mean, I have some fuck you money, but it's not like I have fuck you money where I could just do whatever the fuck I want. You know, it's like, but by the same token, I felt like my integrity was on the line. There was such egregious breaches of honor and integrity and truth. There were such disgusting things happening in the world publicly for all to see, and people were so afraid of the bullies that I had to stand up and say something. Maybe it's I, I don't know whether that was a self-destructive part of me, or just the part of me that is educated by objectivism, like, this will not stand. I can't stand this. I will not. Even just recently, I wrote a random tweet that was something along the lines of, 3 things that people are absolutely and permanently insane about, and it was the Palestinian liberation movement. It was something else, and it was abortion. Well, I just got represented by a couple of new agents for conventions, and they're like, Mark, what are we supposed to do with this? You're intentionally put something up that's extremely controversial, and we're supposed to sell you to conventions. I mean, I'm at a loss. I mean, I don't know what to do, because it got something in the neighborhood of 50 or 60,000 views. Most of them, Free Palestine bots that are just trying to, mangle you and destroy you publicly and fuck with you. So there was clearly a lot of negativity, most of which I didn't see, but that they did. And they're like, they asked me to take it down. And I said, okay, for you, and out of concern for your reputation, I'll take it down. They also requested that I, issue an apology and say, I'll try to do better. I would not do that, because I absolutely believe what I'm saying is true. I said, but I will protect your reputation, to be mindful about what I put up, understanding that it can have an impact on you that's negative, and on your capacity to sell me in the future. So I've been trying to be more circumspect about that, and not just putting random controversial tweets up. But I also feel like, we're living in times where the bullies are winning because the good people are submitting.
It's a
And
tough line to straddle. That line you're talking about there, it's difficult.
It is difficult. It is difficult. I mean, your self-interest depends on you being able to make a living. And if you're marginalized by people because of your beliefs, you can't make the living. But by the same token, your life also depends on your integrity. Your life also depends on your sense of truth. Your life also depends on a world that depends on truth and reason. And when those things are going away, there's not a lot you can do, right? Without those elements. So you got to fight for them as much as you possibly can. And it's, I mean, I've seen the impact in the loss of maybe 20,000 followers I haven't gained a follower in the last 8 months. I've consistently lost by constantly promoting a message of reason, happiness, pride, sovereignty, human sovereignty, independence. Those are the most unpopular concepts right now in the world.
That's depressing.
It is very depressing, and when I get too depressed about it, I just tune out of social media.
That difficulty that you talk about, because I've come across it so many times. You want to be authentic and you want to speak up, but not at the, like an example, when I was in prison, my friend Brent and we were writing a book called Down the Rabbit Hole, and we were criticizing the prison system. We knew this book was going to put us at odds with staff, with inmates, with everybody. We were putting ourselves at physical risk from the inmates, transfers, all kinds of retaliation. And I was scared to death. Brent has more balls than anybody I've ever met. He wasn't scared at all. I was terrified, but I did it because I thought it was right. But there came one day when he got impatient, well before the book was written, and he says, that's it, I'm writing to the media right now. And I said, hold on, that's it, that's unnecessary. And he says, this sounds like cowardice to me. And I'm like, Brent, I'm willing to take risks, but what you want to do now is just unnecessary. It's not going to further the cause that we're trying to further. It's just going to get us maybe beat up and probably separated. And to me, those, like, that case was easier for me to decide because it was crystal clear that he was just being self-destructive to say, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to say what I think, and that's it. But there are times when it's challenging. You know, this could harm me to do so. I have to have integrity. I don't want to be a coward. But when is it necessary? And Rand, of course, gives the principle. I think it was Rand that did it. Might have been Leonard Peikoff, that you have to speak up if somebody challenges, you know, your principles and your values and your presence. You have to at least say, I disagree. But it's often that that's not directly the case. You know, like you're out with your friends and somebody makes a homophobic slur or something that's not your friend, but might be a friend of a friend. Now, am I obligated to make a scene now? I got to start an argument with this guy, put my friend in a bad spot. You know, if it were my friend that said it, I would speak up. And I think there's a lot of situations in life that are like that. Like, you're in a situation where you have this agent. I think you said they were agents representing you. So you're not just, when you go on social media, representing yourself, you're also representing them. But at the same time, you want to be authentic to yourself and your beliefs. And, you know, those are the struggles that they're not always so clear, to me at least, of what to do in those situations.
You're right. It's not. I mean, I made the choice that if their reputations are being hurt by something I'm doing, then I'm going to be more mindful of what I produce and consider them a part of my inner circle that I have to be concerned about when I go out there and tweet. And it just so happens that, you know, I had gone on a 1 or 2 month hiatus from all my Twitter activity and was loving it. And then the war happened, and I started back in, and quite unhappily, because what I see out there is really disgusting. I mean, nihilism and hatred for the good. You know, people despising Israel for its virtues, and actually spreading lies, whole narratives on purpose, and tearing down posters of hostages, and dehumanizing and otherizing folks who aren't, you know, on the popular bandwagon. That inspires, you know, the fight in me, because it's so unbelievably unfair, and it's going to lead us to a dark ages. It's not like all this technology is something that can stick with us forever and ever and ever. We can lose it. We can lose it in 5 years. And unless we start reversing some intellectual trends, like right now, and it ain't going to happen by silence.
Good point. Before I let you go, I got to ask you a sort of a side question, because it's interesting to me. Now, you were in The Big Lebowski, correct? You had a part in The Big Lebowski. That is one of the most, you know, I've never seen it. I want to, but it's one of the most iconic movies. You know, the dude, and you always hear about this, right? What is it like? Like, just when you wake up every day, like, you know you were in this movie. Does it ever strike you as like, wow, I was in The Big Lebowski?
No.
I see. I wouldn't think so. And that's interesting to me.
Well, because it's just work to me. I mean, and I don't really take the time to think about that stuff. I mean, I was in Capote too, and I got to see, you know, the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman do an amazing characterization, which he won the Academy Award for, and I got to see him behind the camera and in front of the camera, and that was amazing to me. And yeah, working with Jeff Bridges was like phenomenal, because I think at the time he was an unsung genius. I mean, I really thought he didn't get the props he deserved. He got them, you know, a few years later, of course, but I study great actors that I work with, and I talk to them about acting. If I can get them out to dinner or breakfast and pick their brains, I pick their brains. And Capote was like a minefield of great actors. I mean, there was Philip, and there was Chris Cooper, who almost nobody knows. I mean, it's like the guy's won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. He's an amazing actor. And he said that during breakfast. Don't let anybody ever tell you that winning an Academy Award sets your career for life. And I would talk to him about his process and how he came up in the business. And he would say, whenever any young actors ask me how I did it, I say, don't ask me. Because I mean, he did it the way young folks don't want to hear it, right? He started in regional theater. He studied under Stella Adler, and he started building sets and coming on in bit parts. And he worked his way up through the craft like a journeyman. And kids don't want to hear that today. I teach in Paris. I teach in Los Angeles. That the kids in Paris are better than in LA. In LA, they're like, how do you become a successful actor? And they want that magic pill. They want the abracadabra, line that's going to suddenly open all the doors for them. And when you tell them, a lot of hard work and building up your craft, and hopefully one day that collides with opportunity, they look at you like, I didn't expect that. Maybe I'll become an influencer instead. So it's sad. It's sad, but c'est la vie.
It's got to be rewarding too, though, right? To be able to teach your craft when it's somebody that is actually willing to put forth the work.
I love that. Yeah, I do love that. And we have some actors in Paris who are about to become stars. They're great. I love working with them, and I would do scenes with them. And so unlike most acting teachers who pontificate from their chairs, and most of whom can't actually act, I actually get up there with the students. Like Jeff, I used to watch Jeff Goldblum would teach that way too. And I work with them. I do exercises with them. I do the special exercises we do. I've done scenes with them. It's mostly because my wife wants people to see where things can go, because it's easy in the beginning stages of your work as an actor to wonder why the fuck you're doing these ridiculous exercises, and you can't see at that stage that it leads to something very rewarding. And so if they see work that's good and spontaneous and deep and intense and very watchable, and they know that it was the craft that got me there, and they now have a little bit more inspiration to carry on. And it's a bully pulpit for me as an acting teacher. I get to batter them with ideas like Rand.
That's nice. Mark, I know you're busy, but I've got to have you on again sometime when you get the time. It's been a great discussion. I really appreciate you coming on, and on such short notice. I mean, you told me, yeah, we'll do it in an hour. Let's go. Awesome, man. Awesome. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Mark R. Pellegrino, the check mark, which used to be a legacy check mark, and I got to pay $8 a month for it now. But that's my ex profile. Mark Ross Pelly, MarkRossPelle, check mark for Instagram. That's mostly pictures of my dogs and cats and me, though, so it's very benevolent. But if you want ideas, go to Twitter. I'm also on Facebook. There's a few sites for me there, some of them fake, but look for the guy with the devil face with the red eyes. It's a scene from Supernatural. That's the real me. And I have discussions on there sometimes. And, Ayn Rand Centre UK, you're going to find me there talking people's heads off, oftentimes with you, talking shit about the way the world's going and hopefully making a difference.
I love it over there, too. I love the discussions.
Me too. And I love that they're spontaneous. I mean, they're spontaneous, and so we don't necessarily delve as deeply as Yaron Brook does, for example, on topics, but I think we can give the everyman's objectivist
Yeah.
position on things, and I think that's as valuable as anything else.
As do I. And the fact that we can all disagree with one another, I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's great. And I look forward to seeing you there, hopefully this week. I don't
Yes,
know.
I'll be doing a lot of jujitsu this week and a lot of
Uh-oh.
working out because I'm going to Detroit, but I'll try to show up a couple of times this week.
All right, Mark. Take care.
All right,
For
man.
now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Liebowitz. Remember, let me know what you think. Until next time.